Hi there, my name is Harvey. I'm one of the video producers here at Manto. In this video I'm going to do a quick rundown over the exposure triangle so you can get to grips with the basics. So let's get straight into it. When you're first getting into photography or filmmaking, it is really overwhelming that the amount of buttons and dials. So initially putting it into auto isn't a bad thing at all. The key thing here is that you're just getting out with your camera, you're going to be learning loads about composition, what you like to shoot, when you like to shoot and things like that. However, over time there's a good chance you're going to reach a point when you're really wanting to try and get the most out of your camera. Perhaps you've seen a type of photography or filmmaking that you're really interested in, or a technique that involves fully understanding and controlling the role that shutter speed, aperture and ISO are going to have on creating that photo. For example, long exposure photography of a waterfall, or you want to do some astro, you're really going to need to know about shutter speed and what sort of speed it needs to be at to achieve that image. So this leads us on to the exposure triangle. Let's start off with the aperture. The aperture is actually determined by the lens rather than the camera body itself. Some lenses are a 2.8, some lenses are an f4, and some lenses all go all the way down to f1 or 1.2. So often the lens that you get is going to tell you the aperture of the lowest aperture possible with that lens. So this one, for example, will open up to an f2.8. So that's pretty good. That's going to let quite a nice amount of light in. When you change your aperture, you're not only affecting the amount of light getting into your camera, into the camera's sensor, but you're also affecting how your image is going to look. So shooting an f2.8 creates a shallower depth of field than an f4. If you were shooting a big landscape vista and you want to have lots in focus, so a deep depth of field, then you might want to shoot at f8 and above, and that's going to make sure that your image is sharp throughout. However, when you're shooting at a lower aperture or a wider aperture, you're going to get that shallow depth of field, which is a really sought after look when you're wanting to separate your subject, because you can get the blurry background and you can achieve that bokeh or bokeh in the background, which always looks really nice. So moving on to shutter speed. So when you press the shutter button, the shutter speed that you have set will determine how long your sensor is exposed to the light. So if you have a fast shutter speed, it's not going to be open for very long, which is going to be letting less light in. And then if you do a slow shutter speed, it's going to be letting lots of light in. However, the shutter speed has a huge impact on how your image looks. Say for example, you're wanting to shoot some sports photography or car photography, you're going to want to use a really fast shutter speed in this case. This is going to allow you to freeze the action and not get a blurry image. So let's say you're going to shoot at 1,000th of a second. So this is a really fast shutter speed, and it's going to be letting very little light into your camera. Shooting in bright daylight is going to really help, but also if you have a lens that has a wide aperture that opens up to 2.8 for example, this is going to help get enough light into the sensor to expose your image properly. Then say you wanted to use a really slow shutter speed, say if you wanted to shoot a waterfall or astrophotography, then you might even open the shutter up to 30 seconds or even a minute or even longer. And then finally moving on to ISO. The ISO in your camera determines how sensitive the sensor is. So the higher the ISO value, the more sensitive to light it's going to be, and the lower is the less sensitive. However, things to watch out for with this are the higher that you go, the more noise or grain it's going to introduce to your image. And typically the lower your ISO value, the cleaner the image will be. Every camera has its own native ISO, so maybe do a quick search of your camera, say for example Canon R5 native ISO, and this is going to tell you the best ISO that camera performs at. So on this camera it's set to ISO 400 because that'll give me the cleanest image. However, there are situations where you're going to want to go higher in order to get the correct shutter speed or aperture value. So it's all about finding the balance between the three, the aperture, shutter speed and ISO, in order to create the image that you're looking to create. So that's been a really quick introduction to the exposure triangle. I know it's super brief, but hopefully it's given you a bit of an understanding about how these different components of the exposure triangle are going to affect your image. It can be a lot to take in when you're first learning, but you'll get there, it'll click one day. So thanks for watching, I hope you're able to take something away from that. Don't forget to check out our channel and subscribe, and we'll see you soon in the next video.